going to compliment you the entire time. He might be a little fresh.
The keystone in the arch of Star Wars.
It's a show that I dearly love and admire, so thanks for having me.
Sorry, I'm getting like emotional.
And you got this hulking, scary dude with the big nose and the perfect hair.
I understand. This is a safe space. This is a safe space between you and I and all of your viewers.
Cassie and Jim on the beach, and people are like, no. I can literally hear people out there, no.
Rogue One was awesome. I love the Han Solo movie, and then of course I love The Mandalorian.
And like getting to talk to fans face to face and learn their names and just, get to hear their stories.
And in the world of Star Wars, there's a bunch of people who look different. There are different species. There's lizard men. There's psychic baby swamp monsters.
I joke that the best thing about writing Princess Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst thing about writing Princess Leia is everyone knows who she is.
And also you get Ewoks, and I am definitely a lover of Ewoks.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Yes, it's a good thing. It's a great thing.
Well, hello and welcome to Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I am your host, Pete Fletzer, but you probably know that if you're watching this live, you're a patron. You've been following us for a while, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Tonight, we're going to have a ton of fun. We are recording this episode with a gentleman named Michael Messer. Michael is a comedian and a voice artist and impressionist and a gigantic Star Wars fan, so much so that he too has his own podcast. So without further ado, let's get things started. I'll bring in Michael Messer.
Pete, thanks for having me.
Michael, thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate it. How are things going? We're recording this on the day that the Kenobi trailer out of nowhere hit the interwebs and took off. And how are you feeling after the whole Kenobi trailer today?
I'm still catching my breath. I think it is. I think like most people that watch either your podcast or my podcast, meaning you love Star Wars, the love runs deep. It's a day we've been looking forward to for a long time. And then when it's finally here, you're just kind of in awe. I feel like I'm transported back to 2005.
Yeah.
Just could not be more excited with what we got today.
It definitely has those prequel vibes, and I think we'll probably keep somewhat of a Kenobi theme today. But Michael, for the people who don't know you, maybe give us a quick background as to who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Michael Messer, and some people follow me on TikTok, on Instagram. I'm a comedian, a voice impressionist. I do a lot of characters, celebrities, animated, real life Hollywood celebrities, whatever you want to call it. I like to impersonate people and hopefully make people laugh and have a good time and add some joy to some people's lives. And like you said, though, I'm also a diehard Star Wars fan. Have been for many years, and am a co-host with my brother Nate and uncle of our podcast, Star Wars Guys. So it's talking about Star Wars around the living room, around the kitchen for many years. And then it was finally like, all right, let's just put a microphone down and just record our thoughts.
Let's just do it. And it's funny too, because I'll tell you the short story how I found what a lot of people who listen to my show know, like the objective of, or sort of what I try to capture in this show and these conversations is sort of that magic moment when two people who are Star Wars fans kind of meet for the first time, whether you're at a grocery store and you pass a guy that's got a Star Wars shirt and you're like, hey, I like Star Wars or whatever. But so the funny thing about discovering you is I got into one of those it was one of those times where you start on one Instagram video and next thing you know, you've gone through like 45 minutes of your life and you've just went. And I saw this guy, Michael Messer, who was doing all these hilarious impressions, really like spot on impressions. And I was like, this guy's wearing a Star Wars shirt in like 70% of his videos. I wonder if he's a Star Wars fan. And so I sent you a message, and you were like, sure, I'd love to talk Star. I had no idea. And I was telling you before we got on, I feel a little bit ignorant, but it's because my TikTok following is 106, not 106,000, 106. And you have 1.8 million people following you on TikTok. When did you start your TikTok channel, and how did you how did you like even decide that that's a place that you wanted to play?
Yeah, so it's funny I like to say I think I know the least about TikTok of anybody who has a big following on TikTok, meaning I don't know what the latest trends are all the time. My wife has been in some of my TikTok videos here and there and is always a good sport about it, but she's usually like, oh, hey, and shows me like a funny video and is like, oh, there's a trend. And I'm like, I've never seen that before. She's like, you never seen it before. It's the number one thing on TikTok. And I was like, I barely know how to use the app. But so the long story short is back when the app, a lot of people may remember the app, the social media app Vine back in the day. And I messed around with some impressions on Vine. And I'm someone who just comes from just a family who's always loved movies. And back in the Blockbuster days, it was always, renting an entire Indiana Jones trilogy or renting all the Rocky movies on the weekend. Or obviously by that time I had owned all the Star Wars movies, but it was just, it came from a love of movies and a love of, I'd watched Star Wars so many times that I'm like, well, maybe I'll start quoting the movie. Well, if I'm going to quote the movie, why not try to sound as much like Han Solo as I can? And it might be easier said than done, but that's just kind of how it started. And TikTok came around because my 12-year-old little girl cousin at the time, who was doing some TikTok dances on a family vacation, said, hey, follow me on TikTok. And I was like, I don't have TikTok. And she goes, well, here, and took my phone and downloaded the app and gave it to me. And I didn't do anything with it immediately. And then I started hearing about people getting on there. And I was like, well, I might as well mess around. And at the time, I think it was maybe Infinity War had just come out. And Marvel was the big thing at the time. And so I was like, I'll start messing around with some Thor impressions or Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark. And I would post some stuff on there, and then I kind of would come back to it, and I'm like, whoa, a lot of people like this stuff. And then that kind of snowballed. And then yeah, that's kind of how my TikTok journey, if you will.
It's wild. It's wild. And it is. And I, like I was saying before, I know it so little about it. I'm always amazed when, like, I will go back and there'll be a video that suddenly had 14,000 views, and for 106 followers, I don't know how it happened. I don't know what magic
awesome.
happened that day, what algorithm I ended up in, but whatever. And it is pretty wild, and how it exposes you and it gives you opportunities to be seen by so many people. So you said that you were a big Star Wars fan, and that's what got you into impressions. In a way, let's start though with, how did you get into Star Wars? What's your sort of Star Wars journey?
So my Star Wars journey is my uncle, who is actually one of the hosts on our podcast now, who has recently moved to St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I'm from, and my wife is from, and my brother lives here as well. So my brother and I were doing a podcast together, and then my uncle moved here, and now he's with us. But it all runs back to, honestly, my uncle. So when I am old enough. I'm 30. I'll turn 31 this July. So I'm old enough that when I was definitely an original trilogy. I was just old enough that I had watched all the original trilogies, the first 3 films, was obsessed with them, played with our Star Wars guys, which is why we got the name of the podcast, which is what we called our action figures at the time.
Right.
So me and my older brother would just, we'd write our own Star Wars stories in our little notebooks. And I was like 6 at the time and probably could barely write, but my brother was like 8 or 9 and was a much better writer than me. And we would write out little Boba Fett stories or I think at the time, even it was like, oh, there's not just Yoda, there's Yaddle. Well, this is write a Yaddle story. So just bizarre stuff, but it all came down to my uncle, who introduced us to Star Wars, A New Hope, in my grandmother's basement when I was 6 years old. And I remember, it's funny because you don't remember a ton when you're that young. But I
Right.
very vividly remember. I remember the exact old with the big antennas TV that we watched it in their basement, and it was like we turned off all the lights. And my uncle was like, "Listen, sit down. You have to watch this. This is going to change your life." And I was like, "Okay, I'm 6. I don't know anything." And
still plenty of time to change it, but sure, let's go with it.
Exactly. That's a pretty big statement, but he was right as far as, I mean, did I understand every deep George Lucas theme or the politics of it at 6 years old? I did not, but it was, I was definitely just engulfed in just the world that, the galaxy that George had created. And there was just so much of it that was just, I just got swept up in it. And that's some of the beauty of, especially those original 3 movies. And I'm a big prequel fan as well, but with the kind of, tip of the iceberg, give you stuff, but don't spend it. Especially, I love watching the old George Lucas interviews of talking about how he made A New Hope. And he was like, the budget was so low that I didn't want to stay on one shot too long, because then you would notice that it's low budget. So it was quickly going through it. And so my mind was just like, what's that? What's that? What's that? Now I have to watch that over and over and over again. But it goes all the way back there. Is just through my uncle who introduced it to us, and then just immediately fell in love.
I wonder, I've been doing over 150 episodes of this podcast. I've spoken to so many people, and I can't always find the right way to describe what it is about Star Wars that does that to people. I mean, I was 7, I saw it in the theater, and I don't remember the movie so much, but I do remember the feeling afterwards. I remember being in my parents' car on the way home from the theater and just being like, what just happened? And it's so interesting that for so many people, it's had that tremendous effect. Is that how you got into doing impressions? How you discovered you can do impressions, or is that?
I would say, yeah, there were a number of films around that time that I mean, one of my earliest impressions was definitely Sylvester Stallone, Rocky Balboa. I love the Rocky franchise, and that was just one of the easier ones where also I just dropped my voice. And as a kid, how low could you drop your voice? But I try to do the Rocky lip and also do the yo Adrian. I just start messing around with it a little bit, and hopefully it's gotten better over time. But the Star Wars, I think messing around, and everyone, probably around that time, especially as I started getting a little bit older, people started trying to do their own Yoda impressions. And but I was always I always loved, it's funny, this is all happening on Obi-Wan Kenobi Day, because I was always really fascinated with old Ben, with Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan, of just the mystery of the old wizard in the desert. And so going back even then, it was something way before Vine or TikTok or any of that stuff. I would just joke around with my friends, especially as I got older into my teens and then even 20s, of just like saying stuff and pointing out things as old Ben, as Alec Guinness is just like, "Hello there. Oh, come here, my little friend. Don't be afraid." And I'd say that to someone who is a Star Wars fan, and then it would just veer off into, well, what would that be like in this scenario? And then, what is old Ben at Taco Bell like? Well, I'd like 2 burrito supremes. And he just starts, or just Taco Bell. Well, that is a name I've not heard in a long time. It's just the deep pondering, and Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan was always great. It's just the how just introspective he was.
Right.
I think we're gonna get a lot in the show, but I love it.
Well, that's really cool, and it's there's a question here from Matthew, one of our patrons. Who's your favorite character to do an impression of? Is it favorite Star Wars character? Is it Obi-Wan, or?
Oh gosh, that's such a hard question. So what's funny is, even though I've done voices for a long time, the beauty of a TikTok or an Instagram, when I started really putting a lot more content out there, and I've tried to expand the repertoire a lot. So I really love old Ben, is definitely one of them. There's some that are a little bit harder. I've messed around with some Hayden Christensen stuff recently. One of my favorites is also Billy D, of just the smooth talking, like, well, hello, princess. And it's just everything's just, I think I joked around our podcast the other day of just throwing Lando into anything whether he means or not automatically becomes a little seductive. And it's like, you gotta kind of walk the line there. Like, well, I didn't mean it that way, but Lando just comes off as the smooth talking, I'm the administrator of this facility. Well, it's just, I love it. But there's so many, it's hard to choose with all the Star Wars characters.
Yeah.
And then Harrison Ford is just both young and old Harrison Fords. The younger Harrison Ford of just the demeanor and like the cocky laid back of, you never heard Millennium Falcon? A ship made a kisser in less than 12 parsecs. But then I love the crusty old, like, that's not how the Force works, which is very much, that's even like more mid 90s to now of get off my plane. Like all of the angry Harrison, even though he was a little angry in the early ones, just the crusty old lived a life Harrison Ford Han Solo is just, it's hard to beat that because there's still he's even in some of the snark, there's just the charm that comes through, which I always love.
That's great. How do you create an impression? I know you have videos on your TikTok where you kind of talk about how you kind of go about it, but when you like, for example, you just put some stuff up. You had just seen the Batman, which I like you just was blown away by that movie.
Loved it. Yeah.
But when you see something like that, and let me ask you two things. Let me ask you how you get there, and secondly, are you able to watch a movie without going, I wonder how I'm going to do this guy's voice?
Yeah, can I turn off? Luckily, it does not ruin any movies for me, which I'm very glad because I'm such a huge movie buff and I love watching. One of my favorite things, hobbies or activities to do with my wife is we both enjoy going to the theater and going to watch new movies all the time. But it is funny that I would say it's definitely a process that I've tried to kind of pinpoint a little bit more as I've tried to explain it to people. There's sometimes it just jumps out at you. I mean, I was a big, and still am a big Lord of the Rings fan.
Mm-hmm.
And an example of this is I've watched, Lord of the Rings, the Peter Jackson, first three, and I like the Hobbit movies as well, but the Lord of the Rings trilogy I've probably watched 50 times, if not more. I mean, but it wasn't until the last 5 years or something that I was actually watching an old X-Men movie, and Ian McKellen is Magneto.
Right.
And it really helped me get there was something about the way that he would start talking. And it was him saying the word Wolverine and talking to all the people about guns. And he's just like, you must be Wolverine. And it's this thing of like his voice like goes from the front of his mouth to the back and it gets this gravel. And then we say Homo sapiens and their guns. And then I started thinking like, why did that all of a sudden jump out? So there's sometimes like I've watched the movie a ton of times and it jumped out of the screen at me. I was like, well, now I'm obsessed with it. Right. So then I'm in my car and the whole time I'm like just sitting there driving around and I'm quoting just, the first X-Men movie, which at the time when I was probably doing this was like 15 years old, at least by then. And I'm just driving around talking to nobody going, oh, dear boy, whoever said I wanted you? I'm here for Rogue. And it was like, I was trying to just like mess with it. And then it goes back to Lord of the Rings because then I had always struggled with a Gandalf impression. I was like, well, they're the same actor. Now I'll start with that and bring it down and get a little more animated. And then I get the Ian McKellen from sort of Magneto to Bilbo Baggins. I am not trying to rob you. And so there's sometimes where it just jumps out at you where I can't even explain why I had never found the hook.
Right.
Or I've watched this is just me rambling. Sorry, Pete. But
no, this is great. I'm listening.
Yeah, this happens sometimes when I'm trying to piece it together. Very recently, I've watched Tobey Maguire majority of my life as in all the Spider-Man movies and Seabiscuit and all this stuff. But recently I thought that's just a voice that I don't see anyone doing. And sometimes in my mind, as someone who tries to dissect this stuff, I'm like, do they just have like a normal voice? It's maybe easier to do you can do Christopher Walken because no one sounds like Christopher Walken.
Right.
It's easy to see where the hook is. But I was watching, kind of getting ready for Spider-Man No Way Home.
Mm-hmm.
And right after, and people had asked me like, oh, do some more Spider-Man impressions. And I was like, I don't have much Spider-Man. And then I watched Spider-Man No Way Home, and especially his older Tobey Maguire, I just started noticing his lips. It's like, I don't mean this disrespectful at all, but he does this kind of like little duck, like his front lip kind of sticks out, and all he does is talk with the bottom of his lip. So like, Uncle Ben said that the day he died. And it's like his lip up here is just stuck. And then so because of that, I started getting like a little bit of this almost lisp kind of thing that he has. It's so subtle, but it was something I've watched him 100 times. And then all of a sudden in the theater during the movie, I started kind of mumbling to myself, and my brother's even kind of looking at me. I was like, I think I got a new impression. Just watching it. And luckily it's not usually that annoying, but it does just jump out at you sometimes. And then I just get obsessed with it of, okay, then I'll listen to a YouTube video or an interview, and I try to hear what they sound like. And then I'll listen to myself and record it and hear it back and try to perfect it as best as possible.
Yeah. You know, and it's interesting because I don't do impressions, never have, never will. I've always been I think even when I was a kid, I remember like watching like Rich Little and those guys. And I was always like, that's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
But what always amazes me, and you have this skill, is the fact, like I always figured like, okay, if I had like one impression, if it was, I don't know, just if I could do Mark Hamill, which I can't, but if I could, anybody who sounds like Mark Hamill would be like what I would do. But like you have this ability, and great impressionists have this ability to do, you know, a deep voice Thor all the way up to kind of, you know, Mickey Mouse. Like you can pull all that off. Is that because it's I think people think impressionists have a certain voice, but it's more than that, right? I mean, just by noticing, like you said, about the way Tobey Maguire's mouth works is kind of where the voice is.
There's definitely I think you're hitting the nail right on the head there, that there are some that, based on your just normal speaking voice, there are some that maybe come more naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a lot of it that it's like anything where it's a, anyone who gets obsessive about something or spends a certain amount of hours on something gets better at it by putting in the work. Not to say that means everyone who probably tries to do an impression or to do a bunch of impressions can do it. But I do think that I've been very surprised, because I did voices for many years, but it was like, I've got my 10 voices or 12, and that was kind of it. And I couldn't even tell. I think it's into the hundreds of voices that I've done on TikTok and Instagram, but it's because there's always one voice is similar to a different voice. So if I can do, I think I did a video a long time ago, but I love The Dark Knight, and I was just like a lot of people was just fascinated with, with what Heath Ledger did with the Joker.
Right.
And I would always quote that movie. And I started finding out that, if I have like Heath Ledger's, if I start with his raspy kind of, and I thought my jokes were bad. And it's like this, and his voice is like sort of in there. If I go a little bit more nasal, then it turns into like a J, like, so, the Joker. And then I go up here and it's like Jay Baruchel, and now it's like Hiccup, or How to Train Your Dragon. And then, so there's so many that are very similar, that if you have like a starting point, you can kind of take it to the right, it goes somewhere, take it to this side, go a little more nasally, go a little bit more bass. And that has led me to find out that, I can't just do a low Thor voice, but there's some voices that I'm like, I don't think I could ever do that. And you listen, and again, it's something with an interview or something, and then I start repeating that word or phrase. And then I like to say I kind of reverse engineer the impression. You definitely don't start with, I couldn't read you a full audiobook of the Ian McKellen thing I was talking about. I couldn't start with that, but I got the way he said Wolverine, or the way he said Homo sapiens as he was talking to all the people. And then I just kind of build that up, and I'm like, well, how do I translate that into this? Or the hard thing with the comedy videos is I try to really focus on how to not just be vocally accurate, but you want to make people laugh.
Right.
And so then it's, okay, what's a funny scenario? So even going back to the Vine days, I always liked doing, so-and-so auditioning for and I think SNL kind of does this similar thing now too with some of their sketches where it's like so and so auditioning celebrities auditioning for Star Wars, and then it'll be Matthew McConaughey coming in and he's like, well, all right, here's the deal. I'm your father. All right, Lukey, just keep on living, baby. And it's just like, so it takes stuff like that, and then you can, with the ones you get more comfortable with, you can do a little more improv stuff and can stretch it a little bit. But yeah, I don't really know what the limit is as far as the high voice and the low voice, because I just keep trying new ones.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I can't do, but people don't see those because those don't make it on the internet. People ask me all the time, are there any voices you can't do? And I'm like, yes. If you haven't seen me do it, I probably can't do it yet.
Right. Yeah. Very few people put up their utter failures as part of their stream.
Exactly.
That's really funny. So have you turned this into a job, or is this something that's a hobby, or?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. I mean, it's definitely something where through social media and through some other opportunities related to that with sponsorships and stuff like that, there's definitely money to be made, and I've earned some money doing that. But it's also something that I've never been a stand-up comic like growing up or anything like that, but it's something that does interest me and trying to create an act around that. So I think that that's definitely something in the near future of. I've done some sketch, not huge, but I've done some, been invited and done some events of a couple hundred people with a couple of other people on stage and done some voices and I do like the combination of like the sketch comedy improv stuff, as well as just as much as I love just, here's 100 people as Batman, here's what would happen. That stuff's fun, but it is fun doing the active, interacting. I'm not a trained actor, but that stuff, it interests me. So I could definitely see me expanding into more of that. But yeah, it's kind of been a ride, seeing where it takes me, and now I'm just kind of getting my foot in the door of some of those other opportunities.
That's great. Do you find it's different to do an impression in front of a room of 200 people versus in front of your camera for your TikTok channel?
The immediate response is nice. Like you can immediately tell if someone's getting the impression or if you need to, it's always funny where I've done some like videos where you put some time into it and I'm like, I'm going to do a bunch of videos on, or a bunch of characters from this particular show that I love. And then like the show is, 5 years old or something like that. And people are like, dude, we don't care about that anymore. and you don't know why you're making it. You make the video and you put it out there and people give like a good response. You don't get a ton of hate sometimes on those videos, but it's like, oh, that didn't garner the love I thought it would. Where it is nice that when you're doing some stuff like that in front of a live audience, you do get the adrenaline rush of when something is funny, you can really turn into it a little bit more and continue with the bit and add some more stuff to it. You also, with the immediate reaction, oh, well, this crowd really likes Marvel. Right. I've got a handful of other things I can go to then, or this crowd really reacted to some presidential stuff or some Star Wars stuff. So the immediate response is the big difference for sure. Right. And then you do get that buzz, that high of like right when you come off of doing it, you're like, man, that was so much fun. I cannot wait to do that again. Where I love doing the videos online too, but it's a little bit more great. I did that. It's fun. People like it. Awesome. Start thinking of the next video.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You post it, you go to bed, you wake up, and then you find out if people liked it or not. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, one of the things that your TikTok channel is absolutely full of is people giving you a line and then asking you, and then you kind of go off on doing an impression. Since it's Obi-Wan Kenobi trailer release day, I figured it might be great if I could throw you some lines. And I watched a bunch of your videos and wrote down some of my favorite impressions. And if you don't mind, I'll put the line up on the screen and I'll give you a handful of impressions and we'll move on to another line.
Let's do it.
Let's give this a try. It should be fun. All right. So the first line is the classic "Strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine." How would let's do it with I don't know, let's start with Jeff Goldblum.
Oh yes, I'm sure. Well, strike me down, and I will. What will I do? Yes, well, I will. become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. Yes, because life finds a way. Yes.
I'm
Jeff Goldblum is so much sound effects. It's just and then the like weird, just weird laugh. Oh man, Goldblum.
I love his show on Disney Plus. It's like
it's so fun.
It's like it's visual ASMR. It's great. But that was fantastic.
He like really digs into even the caricature of himself on there, which I love. He's like, I am not even going to pretend to be normal in the best possible way.
Right. He has become the character, Jeff Goldblum. He's no longer the real guy.
It's awesome.
All right. What about Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad with the same line?
Yo, Mr. White. Yo, like, I'm afraid that Gus is going to like strike me down and I will become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Yo, Badger. Jesse, no, I don't. It's murder out there, yo. I love with it. Jesse is it's just, yo, Mr. White, for real. Like it's always I'm a diehard Breaking Bad fan too.
Yeah.
It's just he's had a rough life, Jesse is. He's been through it.
Yes,
he has. You can tell with everything. Yo, for real.
I think he's one of those characters that you don't want to identify with, but man, you totally identify with him like every time.
You end up rooting for him so much because he's just been through it.
Oh, that's great. Let's do this one more time. And the Disney shareholder was today, so let's do Mickey Mouse doing the same line here.
Oh boy, what's up, pal? Strike me down, and I will become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Oh, toodles!
That's great. So that's one of those ones where like people expect the Thor, but you're able to go way up there.
That is oddly enough the most requested impression I had by friends in college. At like I'd have just some friends of mine that would be you'd be at some sort of party or something, and some people had started discovering some of my internet videos at the time, and I'm a bigger guy. I mean, it's hard to tell on stream, but I'm 6'5". I played college basketball. I'm a big guy. And when people come up and they're like, "Oh, yo, you're the one who does Mickey Mouse, right?" And I'm like, I guess that's what I'm known for.
Oh boy. You got it, pal.
It's coming out of this gigantic 6'5" voice. That's great.
Like, that sounds like a dub. I think you're voice dubbing that. Yeah.
Carry around a little recorder with you at all times, just in case. All right. Let me pull another Obi-Wan line here. Why don't we go with the "Who's more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him"? One of my favorite lines from Star Wars.
Love it.
Period.
Old Ben.
I think a good one to start with would be not a lot of people do this impression, and I like that you do, and you do it really well. And I think this one is I think it's because of the visualness too that you do with it. But Brad Pitt, can you do Brad Pitt doing this one?
Brad Pitt is he's just so cool. But I got my Brad Pitt down from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where he's got kind of that attitude that So Angie was talking to me. And she says, "Who's more foolish? The fool who follows him? Yeah." It's just this whole like sort of I mean that's what we do, yeah. It's just it's like this quick affirmation Brad Pitt's looking for, and everyone's like, yeah, that's right, Mr. Brad Pitt.
You say, cool
sure.
guy,
yeah, absolutely.
But he's one of those ones like Tobey Maguire in a way where it feels like to me as an average listener, he's just got an average voice, like there's nothing special about it, but there's something you captured that little bit there from him. Yeah, it's a fine one. It's one that even day to day, I'm like It's a hit or miss one where sometimes it hits and other times it's like, is this guy just doing a regular voice? And I'm like, Brad Pitt's in there somewhere, but sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. Yeah. That's cool. Billy Crystal.
What's funny is that's one of the newest voices I've actually just started working on, the Billy Crystal, because it's this whole it always start with it'll take a miracle. There's just good luck. Have fun storming the castle. Well, who's more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him? It's like, he's just always having a good time.
Yeah.
It's just the Mike Wazowski, just Billy Crystal's just awesome. You can't hear Billy Crystal's voice and not have fun.
Right. There's like a smile in his voice, right? Like you can definitely hear it. That's very cool. Okay, so I'm gonna this is the you're going to find many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. So
Yeah.
the impression that you did that stopped me and was like, okay, this guy's doing different impressions was John Lithgow. Because I'm a huge Lithgow fan. I actually years ago I had an opportunity to do some work with him on a very short animated film, and just to kind of meet him was super cool. But nobody does an impression of him, at least since maybe Third Rock was out.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's hear you do John Lithgow doing this classic.
Lithgow's got the fun, almost like two voices. Like he talks like this, and it's like this whole like up and down. Which is real quick before we start this.
Sure.
I stumbled upon the Lithgow because I was trying to work on a Lithgow for a while, and someone said, do some impressions as Batman. And my impression of Lithgow is that he's an older gentleman now, and that he would just be, even though he's done some meaner characters as well, that I know him from his nicer characters, and that he would be such a gentleman that even as Batman, he'd be like, hello there, how are you? I'm Batman. You are going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. It's just this, it's like this wobbly, just up and down. The ogre has fallen in love with the princess. It's just the whole Shrek. Yeah, Lord Farquaad.
Oh, that's right. He was Lord Farquaad. That's right.
Yeah,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
Oh,
no,
man.
that's really funny. All right. What about let's do that as the Joker, the Heath Ledger Joker.
Oh yeah. The Joker's such a physical one. You're gonna find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
I love the key in that one to me. Here I am I'm analyzing it and giving you instant feedback that you didn't ask for. But I love that you like that little kind of he's got that little point like the cling to, like the way you kind of put that in there was perfect. That's one of the ones that requires a little more acting, because he's got his whole Joker thing going. But I just that's one you can't do half-heartedly. I always say there's some subtle voices like the Tobey Maguires or like the Hayden voices and stuff that are kind of such a fine impression, and then you have Adam Sandler, Jim Carrey, the Joker that are like, if I tried to do a calm Joker, it wouldn't sound like the Joker. Right. It'd sound like something else. Where like Jim Carrey, I can't just do it. It's like, you got to go full Jim Carrey. Oh, righty then. And it's like, do the full thing. Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to look like a fool while doing it. But who's more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?
That's great. We'll do one more. And
I love it. Bring it.
More. Okay, what do we got here? How about did we do this one yet? Your eyes can you see if you don't trust them? I think that's a good one. And we could probably give that one to how about Ryan Reynolds? You're Ryan Reynolds,
yeah. Well, so your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them. Well, this guy's trusting his eyes. Yikes. It's just Ryan Reynolds is always like saying something, then judging someone. Well, your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them. Are you paying attention? All right. It's like almost Jim Carrey, but it's like not quite there. The Deadpool's like tamed down Ace Ventura or something like that.
You know, that's the kind of thing that you recognize that until you say it, I never would have thought about it. But you're right. There is a bit of a Ace Ventura to.
It's like his little side comments to himself. The all of that stuff. Like, well, aren't we? Well, aren't we wearing our big boy pants now? Well, shocker. It's like just this whole. It's which I usually could go. Well, shocker. Alrighty then.
That's great. That's perfect.
Just the mannerisms are similar, but yeah.
Let's get a couple Marvel guys doing. How about these aren't the droids you're looking for? How about Thor? Because that's classic.
Well, yes. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Another. Let's get ourselves another droid, because these aren't the droids you're looking for. Loki.
Did you enjoy the Thor evolution? Because I sure did. Where he went from being so serious in the movie to now he's like his comedic Thor is
The best. Yeah.
So much fun.
What Taika Waititi did with Thor Ragnarok, completely reimagining and changing. Because he was, even though I loved the first 2 Thor movies, it was much more of a one note, alien on planet Earth, doesn't know how he's a brute, and this drink, I like it, and this whole thing. But using Chris Hemsworth acting chops was the best, because he is just so funny. My favorite of the Thor stuff is like the emotional. Well, yes, that's yes, of course. Like the whole where he's just like the attitude is so much better than just being the big brute. Even though the big stuff is fun, we know each other. There's a friend from work. But like the comedy writing for him now is just awesome because he'll do anything. Yeah, I love it.
What about Iron Man doing myself, the boy, 2 droids, and no questions asked? That feels like something he might actually say at some point in the movie.
All right, so here's the deal. It's myself, the boy, 2 droids, and no questions asked. It's a piece. Because that's how Dad did it. It's how America does it. Man, it's worked out pretty well so far. that writing right there that quote is perfect for the break, because he has such a this, and that's just how we do it. Like, it's just his cadence, the rhythms of Robert Downey Jr. is perfect for that quote. That was a great one.
And I think the thing too that amazes me about Robert, like there have been a handful of actors, like Heath Ledger as Joker. When I heard that, I was like, that's not a good choice, and it was the best ever. And then Robert Downey Jr. was like, I don't know much about Iron Man, but I don't think it is Robert Downey Jr.
It's so funny now with the world we live in. We don't even remember it's so forgotten where Robert Downey Jr. was in his career and kind of the turmoil and stuff leading to Iron Man, because now he's arguably the biggest movie star on the planet. He is Iron Man in his real life. He's got the colored shades. He dresses like him. He's got the, his attitude. It's just funny because, like you said, it's just feels now like you couldn't imagine anyone else as Tony Stark.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I can't. I wouldn't even be able to begin to see that. Let's stick with superheroes, and how about Michael Keaton?
All right, Jim. Michael Keaton it's a micro impression because it's not one of my stronger ones, but because the voices, if you really listen to especially old Keaton stuff, it's all right, Jim. Yeah, here's the deal. And it's always like I gotta tell you, you ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? All right. And it's like he just kind of has these run-ons, all right, Jim. Myself, the boy, the 2 droids, no questions asked. All right, no questions asked. All right. And it's just this little, it's such a small thing, and it's funny because his voice isn't really that unique, but it's a lot of the facial stuff, and all right, so and he just repeats it. No, don't ask me about that. All right. And it's just, it almost verges into a little Robert Downey if you take it a little more like, all right, and then it's you gotta sort of bring it down. All right.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just watching The Founder of all things, the film where he plays Ray Kroc from McDonald's, and I don't know why I decided to watch it, but I sat and I watched it, and he was captivating, but it was definitely Michael Keaton. I could never see him as Ray Kroc. I was like, no, it's Bruce Wayne, it's Michael Keaton somewhere in there.
Over Christmas time, my wife and I challenged ourselves to try to watch one Christmas movie. It was one Christmas movie a day. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that would be just like Santa Claus is coming to town, or Year Without Santa Claus, some smaller, shorter ones. But we tried to watch one Christmas movie a day for the full month just to see if we could do it. And one of the movies was Jack Frost, which was Michael Keaton. And it's just so funny in that because he's like kind of a big hotshot rocker who doesn't spend a lot of time with his kid. But there's some lines in there. They're just so funny because like his attitude and him talking to his son. His son's name is Charlie. And he's like, all right, Charlie boy, here's the deal. I turned to a snowman. All right. I turned to my snowman. Just don't tell your mom. All right. And like, don't tell your mom. My dad's a snowman. Like how ridiculous is that? But his son's like, yeah, of course. I won't tell. And he's like, all right, Charlie boy, here's the deal. I'm a snowman. And it's tough. All right. Just don't put me in the sun. All right. This is like, what? I just love someone pitching that. Yeah. Pitching it to Keaton. He's like, this is brilliant.
It's like, it's the blink. It's the whole kind of, it's like trying to do Joker there, I suppose. Right.
Yeah.
So it's, all right, one more on this quote. How about, Alan Rickman, the late
Alan Rickman.
Alan
yes,
Rickman.
The late great. This will be the longest quote for such a short quote.
It's only a handful of words.
So great, yeah. Myself, the boy, 2 droids, No questions asked, Mr. Potter. No. It is the longest. The way he sticks on a and like the word "and" is like it's like 3 words. And no questions asked.
Who's
So
your
fun.
Who's your favorite impression to do? Like if you could, you know.
Oh, I get asked this a lot. I mean, it does change. I think I go through man, I think I really do go through like little swings of I really love doing this one, or especially if I find a new one, I really like to dig into them. Some of my classic favorite one, I love doing Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler in recent years has really, even though I grew up as a big Adam Sandler fan with all of Billy Madison and the Happy Gilmore and stuff like that. But growing up, I could only do like the jokey, like that, and like do the stop looking at me, Swan, and like the high Adam Sandler stuff. But as he's gotten older, I love just the gravel in his voice and the way he talks. It's just fascinating to me. Oh yeah, I just wanted to see how you were doing, and I just wanted to check up on you because the Sandman says hello. So it's just I'm just a huge Adam Sandler fan, so that one's fun because you can do anything. But yeah, that's definitely got to be in the conversation for one of my favorites, just because I have I've really just looked up to him and the stuff he's done over the years. But there's always a handful of them. It's hard to pinpoint. I think I like doing some of the ones that people are aware of but maybe don't have nailed yet. Like one thing I come across that I kind of stumble upon a lot is there'll be times, whether it's on social media or YouTube, television, with a lot of like really well-known stand-up comics, is someone kind of gets a new impression or gets it down and you're like, oh, well, I can't touch that one now because like, how could I do better than that? It's right. So there's some of those where someone gets it and you're like, well, I never had that one, but I definitely am not going to work on it now. And then there's others where you hear someone, you're like, oh, they're onto something there. I think I can maneuver and work with that. So like I do enjoy, even though now he's probably one of the most over impersonated people out there, but I like doing the Matthew McConaughey one because there's like True Detective Matthew McConaughey where he brings his voice way down and he starts and like everything's just like this breathy, like, so what do y'all know about Dora Lang, the Yellow King? And then you've got in like the Lincoln commercials and just the if we're trying to move forward, first we gotta bring it back, baby. Gotta look in the rear view mirror. And it's like all this stuff that doesn't really make any sense, but sounds really profound. But also like just I'm fascinated with him on Instagram where he's promoting his Green Lights book and all this stuff because he's another one of those guys who's kind of become a caricature of himself. We're talking about the Jeff Goldblum where McConaughey's. I was watching a video the other day. McConaughey's just sitting there and he's like just singing a song, acting as if he doesn't even know the camera's looking, and then he just turns and starts talking to the camera, and he's just like, he's sitting there and he's just like, Devil went down to Georgia looking for a shoulder steel. And then just starts talking, and I'm like, what is he doing? Like, and then he starts talking about, you got a journal and the things we do, and we are writing down our everyday things. We are green lighters catching those green lights. It's not about looking backwards. We're pumping those numbers up. We're foot on the gas, baby. Pull the brake off the car and just let the steering wheel fly off and see where you go. And I'm like, what in the world is that? So there's stuff that I'm like fascinated. I can't say that I understand what the heck I'm saying a lot of times as McConaughey because I'm not sure he does, but it fascinates me. But yeah, there's a handful. There's so many of them that I even off the top of my head, it's hard to even remember. Like you mentioned some on the list, and I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't done an Alan Rickman in a while, and I love Alan Rickman. So there's always some that I kind of go through a cycle of doing a lot of videos on certain ones, and then someone brings up, hey, do this. I'm like, oh, I forgot that's one of my favorite voices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was cool to see you do Paul Dano's Riddler because I thought that was just such an eerie, creepy character and there was a cadence to that. How did you
Yeah.
get to him so quickly? Because I'm guessing it was probably the day after you saw the film.
Yeah, there's I was trying to it's another thing I've kind of learned from talking to some other people who've done impressions too, is as much as I'm fascinated by people who do impressions, and I love that stuff, you don't also like, you want to try to come up with your own original stuff. So when I first saw the movie, I was like, I don't want to, before anyone can do this, I want to try to get some of these voices down, and I'm sure they'll get better over time. But with the Paul Dano, and I've seen, There Will Be Blood, he's amazing in that, and but the thing that really got me with it, it was almost the Paul Dano stuff I did was like you said, was his Riddler, where he's really if you are like, I did it using my shirt, because sometimes if you do like the hands, you can get the Tom Hardy Bane sound, but there's like a muffled quality to the Paul Dano, where he's like, if you are justice, please do not lie. And it's this weird, like, for what is the price of your blind eye? It's like this weird, I couldn't even put my finger on what it was. It's like, he's both like being sarcastic because he's taunting them in the film, but it's like this, please do not lie. It's this weird, like, guttural, just emotional thing that I just started messing around with it. And then I would listen to myself do it. And I'm like, even the one I just did on the podcast wasn't nearly as good as I have done before, but it was something that I was like, that all of a sudden kind of sounds like him. I'm going to start messing around with that a little bit. So some, you just kind of take a shot at it and you're like, I don't think I have that, or I don't think it's close. And then the ones where you're close is when you just kind of get obsessed with it and you're like, oh, I think I can get better at this one if I get there. Some you try something, you listen to, you're like, all right, that's not even in my wheelhouse, not even close. We'll move on. That'll take me way too long to try to get that down.
That's right. Yeah, that one's not gonna happen. Yeah. No, that's great. Well, cool. Well, this we definitely went a little bit off the rails from a Star Wars perspective, but that's okay. That's good. That's look, that's what it's all about. But if you don't mind, I'll hit you with our 10 question segment of our show. There's no wrong answers. I won't judge you. The internet will, but I won't. Just so you know, and feel free to short answers, long answers, wherever you want to go with it. The first question is, what's your favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book?
Okay. So just not one of each. Just one.
You can do one of each. We've had people do one of each. We've sure.
Man, I would say I know it's the most popular answer, but Empire is my favorite. My reasoning for it, even though I have others that are up there, it's hard to match the original nostalgia of A New Hope.
Sure,
you can't relive your first experience to Star Wars,
right?
As I think many people get frustrated with nowadays.
Yeah,
trying to compare it to that, it's always hard to recapture that. And all that to say, because I know the internet will maybe come after me for it, I'm a big fan of the sequel trilogy. I don't think they're necessarily perfect, as I don't think every Star Wars movie is perfect, but I'm a big fan of that. I didn't know if that could come off one way or another based on what I just said, but I'm sure I'll get comments for just even saying that. But
look, you're down to 1.6 million followers.
Oh, this is great. I love it. They leave very quickly. It shows how much they really liked me until I gave a controversial Star Wars opinion.
That's right. Yep.
Empire. My reason for Empire is one, I love the way it's shot. I love the blue tints and like just the way it looks. But I've always thought that it's kind of the big three in their prime, as far as Harrison. Just from day one, Harrison was kind of Han Solo. I mean, going back to even just the audition tapes, you're like, oh, that's Han Solo. That's just the way Harrison Ford carries himself, with that confidence and kind of the attitude and everything. But the Hoth and Bespin, Leia has always been my favorite. Both of those, but I love the chemistry between Han and Leia in Empire. I think that Luke is coming into his own, and I'm a big Mark Hamill fan. But the big three feels, and I would argue even a little bit more maybe than in Return of the Jedi, that the big three feels very much in sync with, even though they're separated for a lot of the movie, in sync as far as they've got their characters down now. And it's just, how do you top the biggest movie of all time? You then just go even bigger, which I love Empire so much.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I kind of led down the path of answering some of those other ones. I know you've had Claudia Gray on your show before. I love Lost Stars is definitely one of my favorite Star Wars books. I love Light of the Jedi. I really love Light of the Jedi. The High Republic stuff. It's hard to, and I love some of the old like the Darth Plagueis, which is now Legends books. There's so many in the Heir of the Empire trilogy was very formative, especially for me at that time. And then it's hard. I think I would go Clone Wars over Rebels as far as there's just so much more of it.
Right. No, that's true.
And I do think that maybe I would argue that the low points again, when I say low points, not that I don't like it. I think that people always need to remember that not everything is made for them as far as the particular audience. And there's definitely some stuff in the early seasons of Clone Wars, which a lot of the Roger stuff is for the 12-year-old and 10-year-old that's watching it, just as Jar Jar stepping in poop is not necessarily to make me as a 30-year-old be like, that's hilarious. But I know a lot of children who Jar Jar is their favorite character.
Yeah.
And I think George had that in mind. But yeah, where Clone Wars and Rebels, where they started and where they finished was just when I started that show, I would have no idea that it would finish, and go on such a emotional journey, character arcs. It just also fleshed out a lot of those characters that I really liked from the prequels, but I loved getting more Count Dooku and more Padme and even more Anakin and Obi-Wan stuff. It's just, and obviously Maul, but I could talk all day about those shows.
But it's really interesting because I've said it 100 times on my show before, but my son's entry point was Clone Wars. Like that's his thing. And it's funny. I can't watch the beginning of Revenge of the Sith the same as I did before I got into Clone Wars, because that moment where Anakin is going to go back and save the pilots, 20 years ago when the movie came out, I was like, nah, they're just clones. Just let him go. What's he doing? He's being reckless. And now you're like, whoa, because these are his buddies. These are his partners. These are the people he cares about. And that's so much stronger that way, right?
Exactly. I love how there's so many, even with the live action shows, there's so much they're adding to the actual canon, the emotional canon, whatever you want to call it. As far as I can't watch, I don't look at, even when I watch A New Hope, I don't look at the Tusken scenes the same way after seeing some of the Book of Boba Fett stuff. You're always aware of now some of these characters being more fleshed out, like you said, that with just hearing more of the brotherhood and it makes the tragedy of the fall throughout the arc of Clone Wars, when you see just how close Anakin and Obi-Wan were, and really getting a lot more of that, which I know George always was like, I have so much more to tell you, but I can't do 10-hour movies. I wish I could. But yeah. And then also I just think fleshing out, even Christopher Lee was awesome as Dooku, but getting more of him as the actual military strategist along with Grievous, was just, I just love that stuff.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you on that. That's great. All right, if you're going to sit down and watch a movie that's not Star Wars, which movie are you going to pull off the shelf?
Movie that's not Star Wars. There's a number of things I could go here. I would say, I already mentioned The Dark Knight earlier. Is definitely one of my favorite movies. I'm a big Back to the Future guy.
Cool.
I'm trying to think of something other than the stuff I've already said, because there was a reason why Lord of the Rings popped up. I'm a big Lord of the Rings guy. But as far as just let's think of just maybe some one-off movies. I like a lot of. There Will Be Blood is a movie that's not anywhere. It's not even in the same style of film as any of the other movies I just mentioned. But some of those are just cinematic, like masterpieces, where you're just similar. Very different movies, but similar experience of when I'm watching The Batman, as we talked about earlier. It's hard to. I know this is all cinema. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but I was asking, like my wife and I were talking about, because we went and saw The Batman together. It's weird comparing The Batman to Spider-Man: No Way Home.
Right.
When they're both they're both quote unquote superhero movies too. So it's not
Yep.
even just like, oh, one's supposed to be this, a romantic movie, and then one's this. It was one of those experiences where I'm watching it, I'm like, wow, I love having expectations, just being surprised, but also just the cinematic. I love I'm a big Christopher Nolan guy. So I love just about everything he's done. I love The Prestige.
Yeah,
Prestige is great. I think that's an underrated Nolan movie. People like it, but I think that people go quickly to Inception and Interstellar, and deservedly so. Those are great also. But
right.
I'll put after saying 10 movies, I'll put Prestige as a movie that
there you go.
I'd be excited to sit down and watch.
Cool. That's a good one. Yeah. Nolan is again, what makes him a great filmmaker is it's a Nolan film, right? Just you don't need to know anything else about it. You see it, you're like, yep, that's one of his.
Yep.
All right, describe Star Wars in 3 words or less.
Ooh. Hello there. No. That was appropriate for the day. Man, in 3 words or less. This will come out very corny, but A New Hope. I think that one of the biggest things with Star Wars, both with it being my entry point into Star Wars as an original trilogy child growing up, but also just the feeling I get when that Williams Force theme kicks in and Luke's walking out and he's kicking the dirt because he's frustrated, because he feels like he's going nowhere and he'll never get off Tatooine and have his hero's journey and get out of there. But the feeling I get every time I hear that the theme kick in when he's staring at the twin suns, it is inspiring to me. And even at 30 and having sat with these movies for many years, when I hear that, it's like it can come off as cheesy and not everyone has the same reaction. But when I hear it, I'm like, yeah, that's just, I am taken back to when I first saw that and thought like the great wide world that's out there for me, and what's going to happen in the future. What's about like just taking risks, taking chances, and just getting out there and doing stuff. So I find it inspirational for sure. And so A New Hope would be the 3.
A New Hope. I like that. It's great. You find now you said before you have an 8-month-old. Do you find that this isn't one of the 10 questions, but do you find that certain scenes in Star Wars affect you differently now?
Yes, I would definitely. I think even more recently now that my son is of the age of he's the beginning stages of crawling. He's babbling, but not making full words, but the personality's coming through, and there's like this protective. He's not just he's still a baby, I guess, at 8 months, but he's not the newborn child anymore. He is like, I see myself in him. I see my wife in him. And there's so much of I love we'll go back to the Obi-Wan trailer today. I love the shot of Obi-Wan looking, watching after young Luke, and young Luke is sitting there looking just like young Anakin.
Yeah.
And he's doing almost like a pod racing or some sort of piloting motion. And he's even got the goggles on. And instantly what hit me is like, oh, Obi-Wan does not want, the same downfall for Luke. It's like the things that he feels like he has failed. And again, whether right or wrong, he feels like he takes ownership. He feels like he's failed Anakin for where he ended up. And then he sees Luke and he sees like, this can't happen to him. Here's another chance. And when I see even that today about, it's just a quick, like in the chest of like, just the responsibility I have for my son and how he looks at what I do and my actions. But then also like the unknown of just, I'll raise you as best we can. We love on you. And then we hope that when you're old enough to make your own decisions, that you make the right ones and you don't listen to an old hooded emperor type figure in your life that's going to lead you down a dark path.
It's true. And it's funny. And you watch Star Wars with your kids, and it really, it definitely. I mean, it's and that's. I was telling you before we got on that I'm going to celebration with my father and me and my son, and so this generational thing that happens, and it's wild that this story still exists and is still as strong as it is for you as a kid and me as a kid and your children and my children. It's pretty. And that's where honestly, and I don't want to get too philosophical, but with the stupid things that happen in Twitter and social media and YouTube are just, they're so nitpicky when you think of the grand scheme of things. Has the story affected you? Great. Does it matter that the Star Cruiser doesn't look like a Star Wars movie to you? It doesn't matter. But the Star Wars story still exists, and that's something you could share for generations.
Yeah, it's. I think you nailed it right there. This is something I have not had the pleasure of meeting him yet, but I'm a big fan of of both these guys. The Force Center of Ken Knapsack and Joseph Scrimshaw.
Yep.
And I love when Ken's talking about, and he said before, of there's things I love to dive into the weeds too, and then there's also stuff of just like, how did that make me feel when watching that? And I think that's something that, especially in the age of social media, I think that as much flack as the prequels got when they came out, if they came out in the social media era, even the original trilogy, there would have been even the undeserved criticisms. You would have had people that you would legitimately have people who watched Empire Strikes Back, and they were like, great, so in the A New Hope, at least we got this completed kind of story, and then the second one's just he's on the swamp planet with a Muppet the whole time. Like, was it because the budget was the writing just so bad that they could, and you'd have somebody critique one of the greatest films of all time. That there's unfortunately with social media, there's the positive of people having a voice, and there's the negative of you're always going to hear the voice, whether it's positive or negative. Yeah.
I'll have to send you a link. I wrote a story. I think it was on the I don't remember, maybe it was the 40th anniversary of Empire. Yeah, it must be the 40th anniversary of Empire. I wrote a story written from the point of view of a current day fanboy about how bad The Empire Strikes Back was, and nitpicked it like I would if I was doing my YouTube. You'll find it in music, I think.
I can't wait. Yeah, I can't wait. I'm sure that's
awesome. Okay, what is your favorite Star Wars sound effect?
Ooh,
I know you're not a Michael Winslow, so you don't do the sound effects.
I know. What's funny is with sound effects, I have had to refrain, because it's like whenever you have a sound effect in your head and then you say it out loud, and you're like, that didn't sound anything like I was trying to. I can do voice impressions. I can't do the sound effects. I would have to. I mean, the seismic charge is always up there.
Yeah,
for sure. It might be a cheat or because it's a number of sounds, but I love the pod race. The sound mixing with all of that, and just the again, I was this close. I just said all that about not doing it. I was this close to going into to trying to mimic Sebulba's thing coming around, and I don't have it. But the pod race has some of my favorite sounds in all of. And then you've got the class, the vroom, the lightsabers, and the actual sound of I mean, maybe the TIE fighter. The TIE fighters, the sound of a TIE fighter, that like screeching, just kind of menacing sound is always, every time you hear it, I'm like, oh, there's danger.
Yeah,
it sounds like it. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Sebulba's pod racer, because I said I tweeted recently, just after seeing the Batman, that the Batmobile sound design is the best vehicle sound design since Sebulba's pod. I think, because it was the character of that vehicle.
I would totally agree with that. I saw some people on Twitter too. They were like, I can't wait for the Batmobile to get its own movie.
It was so good. It was like awesome. It was very
one of the best reveals too. Yeah, like you said, it's got to be one of the best vehicle reveals in any film I've ever seen. It was a character. It was a character for sure.
100%. Very cool. All right, who's your favorite droid of all the droids and all the films, or animated or whatever?
I'll keep this answer a little bit shorter. I'm an R2 guy.
Yeah,
I love R2. I love I love the R2, now R2, even R2 and 3PO have popped up in so many different things, but every time you see it almost like just validates. There's a comfort to seeing R2, but there's also like this is a big Star Wars thing. They're putting R2 in there.
Yeah.
Like immediately kind of it's one of those things that ups the not that all Star Wars is valid. It's
Right.
not that necessarily ups the validity of it, but you're kind of like, dang, R2's here. Something's going down.
Yeah.
Arthur's awesome.
This is pretty real. There's R2. Yep.
There's R2.
That's cool. Which character from Star Wars would you most like to be, and why?
I would probably say maybe I'd probably go with Obi-Wan. I would say one of the, I mean, I'm a big Luke Skywalker guy too. He's probably my all-time favorite Star Wars character just because of how much he was the hero of all heroes for me growing up. But I do love, and Luke I could say is in the same vein too, but what I love about Obi-Wan is that he is as Luke is as well, but he's a flawed character who is also like Jedi to the core, meaning, he's, no matter how many times Obi-Wan gets knocked down, he's fighting the good Jedi fight. He's doing his best. He's not always perfect. He's got some cockiness and some snark to him that comes out, and he's short with Anakin sometimes, and he's kind of thrust into a situation once Qui-Gon obviously is killed, that now all of a sudden he's raising not as a father figure but more of a brother figure to Anakin, and that's a interesting dynamic. But I've always loved that he's one of the more skilled, as he is shown on Mustafar and other places in a battle, but he's also he's fighting for the light. He's always fighting for the light, and he's, even when Maul is taking out his girlfriend Satine, it momentarily breaks his spirit, but it doesn't break his the resolve he has for he doesn't stop fighting the fight. Yeah,
that's great. That's a good call. That's an excellent call. As Star Wars fans, we all seem to have them, but what's your favorite Star Wars collectible?
Ooh, favorite Star Wars collectible. I've got some sitting around even as we speak. I have some very old I love just even the some of the old Kenner action figures, but I think recently, I'll go with a recent one because I've got it sitting here. My wife just always knows the way to my heart, but this was this is around Christmas time. We got just a little Boba Fett pet, or I get a little candy. It's not even necessarily a Pez dispenser, a little candy dispenser, and it's got the it says like 4 lines because that's all Boba has.
All he had.
Yeah, and but I love it because that thing has it's been in my office when I'm doing some work stuff, and I've brought it over when I'm recording podcasts. And so small, it like literally fits my pocket, but I'm just like, I'll put it right here, and it's awesome. But I've also got I've got the lightsabers. Or when I went to Galaxy's, currently I would say my Galaxy's Edge lightsaber would have to be up there. The experience of making a lightsaber at Galaxy's Edge, and I have not to drag on your podcast longer than it needs to. But I've got a quick Galaxy's Edge story that's
please,
funny.
yeah, let's hear it.
Funny. So my brother Nate and I, who do our Star Wars Guys podcast together, we went a few years ago, however long it was, went to Galaxy's Edge in California on the opening day to the civilians. So we didn't get we weren't there with with the people who got the pre walkthrough and all that stuff, but it was like the first day that anyone could go. And we went there, and we lined up in a line at like 5:30 in the morning. And we assumed that you would have to get there super early. We were like one of the first people there. There was a couple other people that were there, and you can't get in until like 7 or 8, right, which we found out once we got there. But we're like, we're going to get first in line. And quickly by like 6 o'clock, it started really filling up. So we were like, we just made it in time. But the funny story is, when we were there the first day, or we were only there one day, but right within like the first hour, we started walking around to the shops, and I've got some Jedi robes that are sitting off camera here. My brother and I were talked into by one of the people who was working there. They're like, "Hey, those Jedi robes look good on you." And I'm like, "You think? Okay." And we bought these really expensive robes, and but we didn't know, and we didn't know the rules about like not dressing up at Galaxy's Edge. If you're a child, it's okay, but as an adult, you're not supposed to, because they have, you know, the hired, you know, the actors who are actually playing Kylo Ren and playing Rey walking around. We had no idea, and so we buy these robes, and you're allowed to walk around with the robes. We had some people that are like, "Oh, you're not really supposed to wear the robes," or we had gotten mixed signals of someone saying you can wear the robes but don't have the hood on because it can confuse some people. We're like, "Oh, okay." So we just wore these robes like almost all day. But as the day started going on, people just constantly thought that we were actors hired by Disney. And there was a time during our lunch break, like I'm an employee. We weren't. We just sat,
wait a minute. Are you
lunch.
Sure you weren't an employee?
I'm getting confused here. We're not employed by Disney, but we were just walking around. We took a break and got the Ronto wraps and the food there at the little spot. And we're sitting down, and like a line formed of some people, and we were like, "What?" We thought like, "Oh, some people are coming to like, there must be a big performance and they have stuff there." And then finally someone just came over from this line and was like, "Hey, when you guys are like, would you guys usually do your pictures, right? When you guys are done with your lunch, will it be here?" And there was like a line of like 25 people that were lined up, and we were like, "Oh." And so we just kind of gave each other a look, and we're like, "We're not going to tell anybody." So we just took pictures with everybody. And we momentarily, not trying to be a rule breaker, we momentarily put the hoods up, and we're like doing some, and we had our lightsabers and everything, and we're taking some pictures. But it got really funny because that happened, and we were kind of like, "Oh, that was fun." But as the night, we stayed there all day, and at night we had the lightsabers glowing at dark. We had the hoods on. People couldn't really see our face a ton, and we were kind of like, we've been there all day. We were like, I know we're not supposed to, but there was one guy who worked at Galaxy's Edge who, after all these people said you couldn't do it, we asked him about it, and he was like, "Oh no, you're good. Just like as long as you stay in one spot and take pictures like in a certain area, they won't think you're like a cast member roaming around trying to mingle with people." And we're like, "Oh, I don't really know if that makes sense, but okay." So we stand off to the edge of like Smuggler's Run, which is the Han Solo ride, and we're off to the side, and we're just taking pictures with some people, and a Disney employee comes up with a pass on, and we're like, "Oh gosh, we're getting reprimanded." However, I don't think they would kick us out of here, but they would say something to us. And instead, it was a photographer for Disney who said like, "Hey, could you guys scoot over and do?" And he started taking pictures of us for a promotional thing they did, and then like even gave us his number. He's like, "These will be on the website at this."
Oh my gosh.
Like, "Oh, okay." And then he left, and we're like, "Does he know we don't work here?" And we weren't really sure if he knew. And but so that was a long story of it happened throughout the day, and I think by the end of the day we'd taken 100 pictures with people who thought that we were, who just assumed that like, "Oh, there's some two tall guys with robes on. One had a black robe, one had the the brown robe on." And my brother had a little bit of a Kenobi style beard going at the time.
There you go.
And he really fit the part, and it just turned into taking a lot of pictures and even some videos of people who I think to this day think that, I'm sorry if you're watching and you think that you got a picture with a cast member. It was just us, couple of clowns on the internet. That was
awesome.
Who you took pictures with. Yeah.
Hey, that's great. Yeah. They're probably like framed on people's walls somewhere.
Yes, they're like, "Oh, this is someone who played in something." Like, maybe it's a voice actor of something. I don't know.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's great. Next question on here is, if you could own any spaceship or vehicle from the Star Wars universe, which would it be?
I would say the Falcon, although it takes there's a lot of maintenance involved with the Falcon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, man, I actually, I'll just we'll go, Luke's, just the land speeder. I love just the cool like the casual vibe of just like packing up the kids, bring a lunch, or we're gonna have a picnic out in the Dune Sea. Like It just
70s
feels like
brown
such
and
a
orange. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, a little casual vibe there.
that's cool. It's a comfortable vehicle. There you go.
Yes.
What's your favorite Star Wars moment?
My favorite Star Wars moment, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, still is to this day, I think, just Luke looking out at the twin suns. It's it's aside from the actual background on my phone, which is my wife and my son. When you open the phone and you've got like just the apps, it's that background of just the back of Luke with his kind of his leg up, and he's looking out at the horizon at the twin suns of Tatooine. So just the first time I heard the Force theme of that John Williams classic theme kick in, still my favorite. There's a lot of, I mean, the trench run is hard to beat as far as the actual sequence, and I find inspiration from a lot of different moments. More recently, even just watching. I think that you were talking about moments that affect you as a dad now.
Right.
I just recently watched, and I'm a fan of The Last Jedi, but I just recently watched The Last Jedi for the first time, I think, since my son was born. So it had been a little bit, or at least I've watched it here and there, kind of in the background, but I was watching it for for podcasting purposes and like intently watching it. And one of my favorite lines of that whole film is it's a lot of people's one of their favorite moments is the Yoda Luke as the tree is burning, and they talk about we are what they grow beyond, and talking about the greatest teacher failure is, and it gives me encouragement as a dad who's trying to obviously do his best for his son, that you're not going to be perfect, but it's about trying to instill those values in them. But like we were saying earlier, like eventually your kid moves out of the house, and there's you try to set them up as best you can. But it was almost like an encouraging just like, you learn from your mistakes. Greatest teacher failure is, and you do your best, and you're gonna mess up. I know as a dad I'm definitely gonna mess up a lot.
Right.
But just knowing that hopefully they're taking away a lot more of the positives than your failures and stuff like that. So that's a moment that speaks to me as far as one of the newer movies.
That's great. That's great. Well, the last question is, what is your go-to Star Wars quote?
Go-to Star Wars quote. Honestly, I think it's the there's so many, but I think the old Ben of just, I love the Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan. Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time. A long time. I love. There's something so much about that. It's like it's a scene stopper. Yep. Everyone's listening to this old man just kind of think about stuff, and Luke's on the edge of his seat. But I love that because I've just morphed that into so many different things in my life of I've got to call back this restaurant. We're trying to make a reservation or something like that, and then we're going to get food, and it's like, oh, this is a place I've not called in a long time. It's just you change one word and it fits everything.
Well, and that's what, speaking, this Obi-Wan's obviously been sort of the theme of the day, but it's interesting. I've said that is the best accidental acting of all time, because obviously at the time nobody knew where the movie was going, where the saga was going. But you watch that now, much like when Anakin goes back to wants to save the pilots in Attack of the Clones. It's different because of watching or Revenge of the Sith. It's different because of watching Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing the full Obi-Wan story, now you watch that and like he knows, and we'll probably get some reference to it in the series that's coming. But he knows, since Luke is asking about Obi-Wan, stuff like the shift just happened, and I have to prepare for, this is the end game, this is what I've been preparing for, this is what I've been training for, and here it comes. And he kind of just, you get that sense, that weight that only Alec Guinness can deliver. It's such a powerful scene, and again, that's one of those scenes that has changed as we've gotten more and more Star Wars to surround our favorite stories. So
there's so much with that scene, all of the Alec Guinness stuff in A New Hope, but that scene in his hut, and he's talking about Anakin Skywalker, he's talking about his father and stuff. There's so much there that it's always kind of entertaining when you see some of like the YouTube mashups people will do of him talking about he was a cunning warrior and he was a good friend. And like there's this pause and then it like cuts to, and there's like he says it at some specific pace that is just so good that it has just this weight to it, that it is like him and now also us taking that one like little pause to reflect on like, yeah, dang, it is tragic what has happened to him.
Yeah.
And it's like there's just enough time that if it was played any faster or delivered any faster, that there's almost not that much time as an audience member who has now seen these characters, and especially now with the Obi-Wan series, even more fleshed out with the Clone Wars and the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, for us to get a little bit of that, like just reminisce and like preach, Obi-Wan. You know what you're talking about. Like I'm with you. It's been a ride. And then finally Luke is, like you said, that's the switch of finally, after all this patience and this waiting by Obi-Wan, you're asking about Obi-Wan Kenobi. I guess you're ready. Here we go. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, it's so great. It's so great. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, Michael, this has been phenomenal. This has been a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, a lot of really funny and great memories about Star Wars with you. Tell people where they can find you on the internet.
Yeah. So I'm, my name is Michael Messer. This is always, I need to get this changed because it's not consistent across all platforms at the moment.
Branding, Michael. Branding.
Yeah, I know exactly. This is as you've got on the screen. I appreciate it. On TikTok, it's Michael_Messer on, and it's always bad when you get one of them and you're like, I feel attached to that. That's pretty good. And then I go to Instagram. I'm like, someone beat me to it. Now I'm on Instagram. I'm Michael_Messer1 with just the number 1. And funny enough, on Twitter, I am Michael_Messer2 because 1 was also taken. So eventually I've been kicking around the, throwing the Michael Messer or Michael Messer voices but it's hard because it's one of those things where if you like just one of the handles, you're just like, I just need a couple of these other guys to change their handle and let me get that back. But Michael Messer, very different iterations of Michael_Messer 1 or 2.
Well, we'll put the link. We'll put the links in the podcast below so people can find you for sure.
And the podcast is that my brother and uncle host is it's called Star Wars Guys, and that can be found on YouTube. We're doing video stuff on there now, and then where all podcasts are housed, whether it's Google, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. So check it out. We try to take an approach of a lighthearted, celebrate Star Wars. We do deep dives. Sometimes we'll have the occasional 2-hour episode,
right?
Especially if we're really breaking down some themes or going deep on it. But we do. There's some voice stuff in there. There's some comedy, some laughter, some hopefully not taking ourselves too seriously. Even though our love of Star Wars runs really deep, if you are looking for the podcast, you're just going to hear everyone just bashing everything. That's not our show.
No.
And if that's the show someone else wants to run, more power to them. But that's not the way we like to enjoy Star Wars. And we'll still make fun of the stuff because there's always stuff to make fun. Not in a mean way, but like just the way that we still to this day go, what's that flashing? And like the funny Luke stuff, like, it's goofy. There's Star Wars has always been a blend of the really cool and the really either grotesque or goofy is where George always loves that fine line there.
It's like how Ash Crossan, who is now with I think she's with Slash Film, said, or no, Screen Rant. I don't know. Now that I've screwed that up,
I think it is Screen Rant. Only because I saw a tweet by her today talking about Screen Rant. I think I need an Obi-Wan Kenobi day off or something like that. Yeah,
that's right. Yes, it is Screen Rant. But she said, Star Wars is like your younger brother. Like you love him to death, but you're gonna give him a hard time when it's appropriate. So
yeah. That's the best way to think about it. Yeah.
But that's great.
That was awesome.
Well, Michael, thank you so much. I hope I get a chance to talk to you again soon, and maybe I'll see you at Celebration if we can.
We're in the works. Yeah.
Yes.
I hope so. Because like you, I have yet to be to it. to be. I've yet to go to a celebration yet, so it's on the list of things that is happening in the immediate future. It's just whether it's this year or next year. I'm trying to pull it off, so we'll see.
Awesome.
Hopefully I'll see you there.
Definitely. Thanks.
Yeah.
Talk to you again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Before I let you go, let me get you to say this is Michael Messer, and you're listening to Around the Galaxy.
This is Michael Messer, and you are listening to Around the Galaxy.